Hey there, history nerds. Welcome back to Boring History. Today, we're stepping into the icy, wind-swept world of a medieval village in the dead of winter, around the year 1300. It's the kind of cold that makes your teeth chatter just thinking about it. No electric heaters, no puffy jackets, not even a hot coffee to warm your hands. Yet somehow, medieval peasants didn't just survive these brutal winters. They outsmarted them with tricks so clever they'd make a modern survivalist jealous. We're diving into how these folks kept warm, fed, and alive when the world outside was frozen solid. From houses dug into the earth to sharing beds with cows, their solutions are anything but boring. So grab a blanket, because this story might give you a chill, and let's step into their world. Imagine you're a peasant in northern England, waking up to a morning so cold your breath hangs in the air inside your house. Your home isn't some grand castle. It's a modest, single-room structure, but don't let that fool you. These houses were built to fight the cold like a fortress fights an army. The first trick was digging the foundation 2 to 3 feet into the ground. It doesn't sound like much, but it was like wrapping the house in the earth's own thermal blanket. Archaeological studies show these sunken homes stayed about 10 degrees warmer than surface-level ones, using the ground's insulation to shield against the biting wind. If you've ever noticed how cozy a basement feels in winter, you get the idea. These peasants were way ahead of the curve. Now, you might picture a flimsy wooden shack, but these folks were crafting walls with a material called wattle and daub, and trust me, it was genius. Wattle was a lattice of woven twigs, like a giant basket forming the house's frame. Then they slathered it with daub, a mix of clay, straw, and yes, manure. I know, manure in the walls sounds like something you'd rather not think about, but it was like eco-friendly superglue, binding everything together. Modern experiments show these walls insulated as well as a modern one with basic fiberglass, thanks to air pockets in the twigs and the clay's durability. The manure? It was just the cherry on top, making the mixture stick and last. These weren't thrown-together huts. They were carefully designed to trap heat. The real MVP of the medieval home was the central hearth. This wasn't just a fireplace. It was the heart of everything. Smack in the middle of the house, it cooked meals, dried clothes, and kept everyone warm. Digs from 13th century villages show these hearths could maintain 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit inside, even when it was below freezing outside. To us, that might sound chilly, but to a medieval peasant, it was practically a beach day. The smoke from the hearth did more than just warm the room. It rose to the ceiling, creating an insulating layer and coating the thatched roof to keep bugs and rot at bay. Studies of preserved roofs show this smoky trick doubled their lifespan. Talk about multitasking. Every detail of the house was strategic. Windows were tiny, barely bigger than your head, to keep heat from escaping. Low ceilings held warmth close to the floor where people lived. The roof was steep enough to shed heavy snow, but not so steep the thatch would slide off. They even oriented their homes to face the sun's path, soaking up every ray of winter light for extra warmth. In autumn, they'd patch walls with fresh daub and pile on more thatch, even hanging blankets or animal skins for added insulation, like tapestries for the working class. It was like they were playing a high-stakes game of chess with the weather, and they were winning. This wasn't a one-size-fits-all setup either. Over centuries, their housing evolved like a slow-burn architectural experiment. Early medieval homes around 800 AD were basic dirt floors, thin walls. By the 1300s, they were sophisticated warmth machines. Those wattle and daub walls were breathable, keeping humidity in check better than modern drywall. Steep thatched roofs handled snow loads that would crush some modern flat-roofed buildings. Sure, the smoke stung your eyes, and a stray spark could set the place ablaze. But these homes were proof of human ingenuity. As the fire crackled in that central hearth, it wasn't just keeping the cold at bay. It was fueling a way of life that carried them through winter's worst. And that way of life? It was all about precision timing, which we'll explore next as we step into the daily rhythm of a medieval village. Winter's grip didn't just test the homes of medieval peasants. It demanded a daily routine so precise it'd make your morning alarm look like a suggestion. Picture yourself in that same village, the air crisp and the ground frosted over. The sun's barely up, but your day is already in motion. every moment planned to squeeze the most out of the scarce heat and light. These folks didn't stumble through winter. They choreographed it like a dance, and every step was about survival. The day revolved around what they called the golden hours, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., when the sun was highest and the world was as warm as it was going to get. This wasn't lazy brunch time. It was when the whole village kicked into high gear. Manor court records from 1267 show they fined anyone who didn't make the most of these hours, because wasting daylight was wasting warmth. One village in northern England even made slackers donate extra firewood to the community stockpile. Imagine getting grounded by your whole town. They also had frost watches, where families took turns keeping communal fires burning through the night. Miss your shift and you'd owe a chicken or a few dozen eggs. Some villages used horn blasts to warn when temperatures plummeted, like an early warning system for frostbite. Sleep was another piece of this carefully timed puzzle. Forget our modern obsession with 8 straight hours. These peasants followed a first sleep and second sleep pattern. They'd hit the hay early, wake up around midnight for an hour or two to chat, pray or do light tasks, then sleep again until dawn. Historical records from the 1300s show doctors prescribed this split sleep for better health. And it makes sense, it let them stretch their energy across the cold night. While we're out here guzzling coffee to stay awake, they were mastering biphasic sleep like it was no big deal. Food was where their timing really shone. Villages gathered around massive communal bread ovens, some big enough to bake 100 loaves at once. A baker's log from 1298 notes that these ovens could raise a house's temperature by 3 degrees just from the residual heat. They even had bread bells to signal when the ovens hit peak temperature, so everyone could time their baking perfectly. Lunch was around 11:30 a.m., when the ovens were hottest, and the whole village ate together, sharing the warmth and the food. Afternoons shifted to indoor work as the cold crept back in. They had cold watchers who checked dubbing water in clay pots to gauge temperature drops. When they gave the signal, everyone moved inside to preserve the day's heat. Some villages had a point system, lose points for working outside after the warning, and you'd end up with extra chores, like shoveling snow for the community. Evenings brought twilight councils, where the village crammed into the biggest house for meetings as the sun set. These weren't just for gossip, though I'm sure there was plenty of that. The body heat from dozens of people could warm the room by 5 degrees Celsius. Manor records show they saved their biggest discussions for the coldest days, turning meetings into a heat source. Bedtime was a group effort too. The last family to bank their fire had to check everyone else's to make sure they were safe. A 1289 record tells of a guy who nodded off during fire-checking duty and had to give up half his firewood as punishment. These folks didn't mess around. As the day wound down, their focus shifted to keeping food on the table because a warm house is great, but you can't eat a hearth. Their food preservation techniques were just as clever as their daily schedules, turning root vegetables and snow into a lifeline for the long winter months. Now, let's talk about how these medieval peasants kept their bellies full when the fields were frozen and the markets were months away. You might think they were just hoarding a few sad potatoes in a corner, but their food preservation game was so advanced it could put a modern prepper to shame. Step into their world, where every carrot and turnip was part of a survival strategy that was equal parts science and art. Their secret weapon? Underground storage pits. These weren't just holes in the ground, they were the medieval equivalent of a high-tech fridge. Archaeologists have found thousands of these pits across England, with one Yorkshire village boasting 200 for just 50 families. That's 4 personal fridges per household, and they kept temperatures steady at around 40 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. Modern tests show these pits outperformed some of today's root cellars, with drainage systems to keep water out and clay pots for humidity control, maintaining 85 to 95%, perfect for long-term storage. They even used their vegetables like thermometers, placing carrots and turnips strategically. If the carrots sprouted, the pit was too warm. If they frosted, it needed more insulation. A 1283 manuscript lists 20 vegetable varieties by cold sensitivity, like a farmer's cheat sheet before technology existed. Hay was another star player. They wrapped their houses in it for warmth, but they also layered it around storage pits to create thermal gradient zones. Each layer cut temperature swings by about 2 degrees, so 3 layers meant 6 degrees of stability. Modern experiments show this was nearly as good as synthetic insulation. Then there was the snow trick, packing snow against storage pits to keep food cold until May. One site in northern England showed snow pits holding steady at 35 to 38 degrees weeks after the thaw. It was like medieval air conditioning, and it worked because they understood thermal mass centuries before it had a name. These pits were engineering marvels, with multiple chambers for different foods, grains here, roots there, maybe some preserved meat in another. Airflow channels acted like natural ventilation, and soil samples show these pits were practically sterile, preventing spoilage for months. They rotated their food like chess grandmasters, moving vegetables between zones based on temperature changes, as detailed in 1292 manor records. And then there's the fool's test. Every few days, someone had to taste a bit of stored food to check for spoilage. One guy tried to dodge it by claiming he died from bad turnips. Classic medieval humor. This system saved villages from foodborne illnesses, with detailed preservation guides passed down like scientific journals. When it came time to cook, they turned those preserved ingredients into meals that'd make a modern chef jealous. Pottage was their go-to, a thick stew simmering for days, sometimes weeks, with root vegetables for energy, beans for protein, and grains for quick fuel. A 1286 record shows strict rules for pottage ingredients to balance nutrition, and residue in cooking pots confirms it was better than some modern diets. The constant simmering killed bacteria, making it safer than you'd expect. They leaned into fermented foods, too thick winter beer with 400 calories per pint, fruit wines, and veggie preserves packed with probiotics. Gut samples from medieval remains show 50 bacterial strains we've lost today, giving them healthier digestion than most of us. Their bread was dense, dark, and accidentally nutritious, thanks to crude mills that left in the bran and germ. One loaf had more fiber than we eat in 3 days, with 40% more nutrients than modern whole-grain bread. They even overcooked grains for winter porridges, as a 1278 recipe describes, to break down starches for easier calorie absorption, boosting bioavailability by 30%. Their diet doubled fat and protein in winter, timed at dawn, midday, and bedtime to maximize body heat, aligning with modern chronobiology like they were nutrition scientists. With food sorted, their next challenge was staying warm through the night, and that meant getting cozy in ways that'd make your modern bed feel lonely. Winter nights were long and brutal, but medieval peasants had a knack for turning their homes into warm havens, especially when it came to sleep and clothing. Picture yourself curling up in that smoky, single-room house, the fire glowing low and the cold pressing in. These folks didn't just bundle up. They engineered their sleep and wardrobe to trap every scrap of warmth, and their solutions were as clever as they were quirky. Sleep was a group project. Entire families, 6 people, sometimes more, piled onto a wooden platform covered with straw. Forget your twin bed. This was next-level cramped. But it was strategic. Studies show the body heat from a family of 6 could raise the bed's temperature by 8 degrees Celsius, enough to keep everyone from turning into popsicles. These platforms, common in the 1250s, were built for heat conservation. Instead of lying flat, they slept semi-reclined, reducing exposure to cold air by 30% and making it easier to pack everyone in. The platforms were layered with straw, wool if they had it, and whatever fabrics they could scrounge, angled at 15 degrees for optimal air circulation. Modern tests show these beds stayed 12 degrees warmer than flat surfaces, and they were raised 18 inches off the ground, often above the cattle pen for extra warmth, like medieval underfloor heating. Villages took this seriously, with sleep inspectors checking that families were packed in tight. A 1289 record shows a family fined a week's firewood for spreading out too much, wasting heat. They even rotated sleep positions, with kids and elders in the middle for maximum warmth, shuffling as people got up for night duties like fire checking. A 1298 account describes a village elder arranging a family, like spoons in a drawer. Yep, they invented spooning, boosting body temperature by 2 degrees. These rotations were diagrammed in manor records, like a sleep choreography playbook. Their clothing was just as strategic. No flimsy movie tunics here. They wore up to 5 layers of unwashed wool to keep the lanolin, a natural water repellent. A 1267 text warns, "A clean wool cloak is a cold wool cloak," and modern tests confirm unwashed wool was 40% more water resistant. Inner layers were soft, outer ones coarse, creating air pockets that trapped heat better than modern polyester. They stuffed clothes with moss and straw, 12 types of moss, some antimicrobial, others air-trapping. A 1292 record mentions a village brawl over a prime moss-gathering spot. They rubbed clothes with sheep or deer fat, mixed with pine sap in a 1285 recipe that repelled water for 4 hours in heavy rain, lasting 3 months per application. Inner layers used wool nettle blends that wicked moisture almost as well as modern synthetics, though they itched like crazy. Hoods had adjustable panels to cut wind chill by 60%, and pointy shoes reduced heat loss through the feet by 25%. Clothes were stored in herb-filled chests that fought moths and bacteria, with herbs as effective as modern mothballs. They swapped to winter gear based on signs like withering blackberries, accurate to 85% compared to modern forecasts. Spinning bees, where villages made clothes together, doubled as heat sources, warming rooms by 6 degrees and saving weeks of firewood. But when wool and family cuddles weren't enough, they had one last trick: turning their animals into living heaters, which took their winter survival to a whole new level. We've reached the final piece of our medieval winter survival saga on Boring History, and it's a wild one. We've seen how peasants built cozy homes, timed their days with precision, preserved food like pros, and dressed for warmth. Now let's talk about their boldest move: inviting their livestock inside to turn their homes into toasty, animal-powered furnaces. It's the kind of hack that sounds absurd but was pure genius, and it ties together everything they did to conquer winter. Picture your house on a freezing January night, and instead of cranking the heater, you bring in a cow. Or 3. That's what medieval peasants did, and it wasn't just for fun. A single cow could raise a room's temperature by 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, and most families kept 3 or 4 inside, plus some sheep, chickens, or a pig. Modern thermal imaging of reconstructed homes shows this could boost temperatures by 10 degrees for 12 hours. They didn't just let the animals wander. Houses had zones based on heat output. Cows, the heavy hitters, were near sleeping areas. Pigs, less warm, guarded food storage. Chickens squeezed into tight spots for surprising heat. A 1,288 record ranks animals by heating value. 1 cow equaled 4 sheep or 16 chickens, with modern studies confirming these estimates were 95% accurate. This wasn't just about warmth. It was about creating a microclimate. The animals' breath and body heat made warm, humid air, a primitive greenhouse effect that kept houses at 60% humidity, preventing freezing and mold. This extended food preservation by 3 weeks and protected wooden structures. They built special animal quarters with raised platforms and feeding troughs to maximize heat distribution. One site showed cows positioned so their breath warmed the sleeping area, like medieval HVAC engineering. Airflow studies confirmed this added 2 to 3 degrees of effective warmth. Managing animal waste was a challenge, but they had a composting floor system of straw and ash that absorbed it while generating 1 to 2 degrees of extra heat through decomposition. Chemical analysis shows these floors produced antiseptics that kept diseases at bay, doubling as spring fertilizer. Feeding was clever too, rotating feed boxes loaded from outside cut heat loss by 50%. They even tweaked animal diets to reduce ammonia, keeping the air breathable. Disputes over animals were common. A 1276 record tells of families fighting over the village's biggest bull, the ultimate heater. Another family got fined for claiming their skinny cow matched a fatter one. Animal heat assessors used a scoring system based on size and health, matching modern heat measurements almost perfectly. The animals created convection currents, circulating warm air like a natural heater. Reconstructed homes show these setups were 70% as efficient as modern passive heating, maintaining warmth for 18 hours without extra fuel. This all came together like a symphony. The hearth warmed the house and preserved the roof. Animals heated sleep areas and extended food storage. The daily schedule maximized heat and light, from bread ovens to twilight councils. Clothes and sleep setups trapped body heat, and every resource was stretched to its limit. It was a community effort, frost watches, spinning bees, even sleep inspections ensured everyone pulled their weight. A 1289 record shows a village rebuilding a family's home after a fire, sharing firewood and labor. That's the real lesson. They survived because they worked together using mud, moss, and cows with a creativity that puts our tech-heavy lives to shame. What can we learn? Their resourcefulness shows how limitations spark ingenuity. They used nature's cues, plants, animals, seasons, with an accuracy we've lost. Their efficiency, from calories to firewood, feels urgent in our resource-scarce world. So, next time you crank the heat, think of the peasants who turned a cow's breath into a lifeline. Thanks for joining this chilly ride with Boring History. If these medieval hacks warmed your heart, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment. What other historical survival tricks do you want to explore? Stay cozy, and we'll see you next time.